Have you ever been around someone who let every thought, every emotion just come spilling out of their head? Have you ever been with someone who, when they're hurt, lashes out at others, or whose words are impulsive and likely painful? What does it feel like to be around these people? Does it draw you in, or does it push you away? Today, we're diving into the destructive pattern called unbridled self-expression, up next on Master Your Marriage.
Welcome back to another episode of Master Your Marriage. If you're new here, welcome to our show. We appreciate you for being here, and we do drop a new episode each and every week, so be sure to subscribe to the show. And if you do find value from today's episode, we would really appreciate it if you would leave us a 5-star review and a comment. One of the commitments that Robert and I made when we started this podcast, I think we're coming up on 3 years ago, was that we were going to show up each and every week and that we were never going to gatekeep, because we just have so much passion for creating healthy relationships that the tools that we teach here on the podcast are the same tools that you actually pay for in private coaching with us. But we can only get these tools out to couples if the algorithm works for us. And that's how you can help us and help other couples by simply going to the bottom of your podcast player and clicking on the 5 stars and dropping in a quick comment.
So helpful. So helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So on to today's episode. It's been almost over a year and a half since we did a series on destructive and losing strategies, which has been one of our most popular series here on the show. And it's such an important topic that we decided that we really needed to be talking about it far more often than we have been. And it is something that we discuss, Sharla and I, nearly each week between ourselves and also with client sessions. So we definitely should be talking about it more here on the podcast. And this is going to be a very useful series for every single person in a relationship or someone who wants to be in a relationship.
Yes.
This series will help you see what strategies you've been using in your own relationships. Spoiler, we all have strategies to work on, losing strategies, that is. And the reason that we need to know about these strategies is that we have to become aware of what we're doing before we can do anything different.
Yeah.
We cannot change something if we cannot see it.
Yeah.
So it's important to kind of face your losing strategies. Maybe we should say that's what we're doing in this episode.
So these strategies were developed by Terry Real, and he is a therapist. He's a mentor of ours. And all of these strategies have one major thing in common. They are strategies that couples turn to when they're not getting what they want out of their relationship.
Ooh.
And sadly, none of these strategies actually work.
Losing
That is why they're
strategies.
called losing strategies. So today we're going to cover one of the losing strategies called unbridled expression. But before we explain what that is, what that means, what that looks like, and what to do about it, let's talk about when these strategies, these losing strategies, tend to come out most in relationships. So Dr. Murray Bowen famously said, "We all have an adult and an infant inside of us, but the infant doesn't have to run the show."
Didn't we say the 3-year-old was driving the bus?
Yes.
Yeah.
What does that even mean, though? This is a very simplified way of saying that we all have a regressive mind and we all have a wise adult within us. And the regressive part of our brain comes out when there is excessive activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight or flight response, or when there is heightened parasympathetic activity, which is what it's triggering that freeze or fawn or shut down response. So simply put, when there is balanced brain activity, we can be wise. We can be relational with people. But when there's not that balanced brain activity, then we tend to regress to coping strategies, maladaptive strategies that maybe we learned as a child.
I like maybe a different way of explaining it if I could. We all have this regressive mind that is part of us, and it operates out of survival. It's sort of this just rapid onset trigger kind of a thing, often without any restraint. These impulses come from the immature part of our brain. This is the limbic brain, and the limbic brain drives our autonomic or automatic reactions rather than the prefrontal cortex, where wise and thoughtful problem solving occurs. So we have this prefrontal cortex that is wise and thoughtful and even relational, as Sharla says. And then we have the limbic brain, which is just reactive. And under stress, most of us allow our limbic brain to take control, just keeping us in this constant state of just reactivity. When we feel hurt, we hurt back. When our perspective is challenged and we get defensive, we just fight back. When we feel pain, we retaliate by hurting others. The regressive brain is often driven by vindictiveness and indulgence. It usually strives to win at any cost, even if that means stepping on others. And at times, this causes us to be cruel, usually to the people that we profess to love the most.
Exactly. The regressive brain is driven by emotions. It's not driven by principles.
Or logic.
Yeah. And this is why we did an episode a couple of weeks ago about the importance of consciously choosing and establishing principles for your relationship and having guardrails to protect those principles. Because if we don't, then the regressive mind will take over and it's going to end up ruling our lives and ruling our relationships. I almost said ruining our lives and ruining our relationships, but that kind of works too.
Yeah, and both could go together.
Yeah. And we all do it. Here's the thing is we all have this regressive part of us that can be impulsive. We all have behaviors that can emerge when we're upset, when we're stressed, when we're not getting our way. And usually these reactive behaviors for many of us actually feel good in the moment because they can make us feel safe or they can make us feel powerful. And yet these reactions are so destructive for the relationship. And I think that's what I love so much about doing relationship work is that our relationships, our marriages help us to see our immaturities and our limitations so that we can choose to work on those things, choose to work on our reactivity for the good of our relationship and also for the good of ourselves. But in order to do that, I have to choose to heal me. I have to choose to heal myself by focusing on myself and not on my partner. And that's where the core of this work comes in is we have to focus on ourselves. It would be really easy for you to listen to this series and find all the ways in which your partner does this strategy and that strategy and how they're messing this up and that up. But instead, we invite you to listen and ask the question, how might this actually be me? How might I actually be doing this losing strategy?
I think it's a learn better,
Do better.
know better, do better.
Learn better, know better, do better.
So we're in the learn better part here.
Yeah.
Right. And then as we learn about it, then we can know. We're going to ask you to challenge yourself and see if you can start to recognize your patterns. And then we're going to ask you to do better.
Do better.
Yeah. So let's jump into the first in this series, unbridled expression. Unbridled expression is this unrestrained venting, blah, blah, blah word salad. It is irresponsibly and often harshly expressing whatever you think and whatever you feel without compassion, without self-control. So spend 30 seconds on social media and see if you can find some unbridled self-expression at its finest. The idea that I have the right to express whatever I feel, whenever I want to, is pervasive through social media. I always say it's sort of like chumming for sharks. You can just throw in some controversial topic and you will see and experience unbridled expression at its finest. Keyboard warriors, yes. Unite. So again, unbridled expression is the idea that I have the right to express whatever I feel. There are no bounds to what I should be able to express or say. And no matter what I say or do, you should validate it. And somehow some people are under the illusion that this will actually bring them closer in their relationship, forcing you to take my point of view.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah. So agree with me or else.
So Terry Real explained unbridled expression like this. Because I have a thought, I think I should get to say it. Because I have an emotion, I think I should get to express it. He calls it the barf bag approach to relationships.
When people have no boundaries or restraint in this manner, they are likely enmeshed or codependent. And it's a tactic they use to control the other person in their life. It is a way to pressure the other individual to accommodate or manage whatever it is you're feeling when you're not getting exactly what you want.
Mm-hmm. And many of us grew up in households where one parent's emotions ran the house. Everything revolved around that parent's feelings, whether that feeling was rage or anger, depression, sadness. The entire family would become affected by that one individual. And I bet, even as I am saying that right now, I bet there is someone who comes to your mind. I remember this client that I was working with one time. And he was talking about his childhood and he was talking about how when he would come home as a teenager, walk through the door and he would immediately scan the atmosphere to gauge his father's mood. And if his father was having a hard day, everybody was having a hard day. And if that was the case, he just learned that he had to lie low and he had to stay off his dad's radar. And that was how he would feel safe.
Oh, I totally agree with that
You relate to
story. Yeah, I
that?
relate to this story. That's totally the way it was in my house. Oh, and in this case, it was my mom's depression, and we all had to adapt and accommodate to whatever emotion she was sort of feeling at the time. And the quality of her day would dictate the entire emotional climate, the temperature of the home. She was happy, we were happy, but otherwise, man, just like your client, we were walking on eggshells. We didn't want it to blow up on us.
Yeah. So I want you guys to think about that Robert just shared and think about your own childhood for a moment. Was there someone like that in your household? Probably, because it's very common. So who was that in your life? Was it a parent? Was it a grandparent? Was it a teacher? Or maybe it was actually you. So I know, when we were early married, I have to admit that was me. If I was regulated, I was quite gentle, I was sweet, I was kind, but I really struggled with regulating my emotions. And I'm sure that if my kids could remember early on in life, my oldest kids would probably say, yeah, that was mom. That was mom that I had to walk on eggshells around. And certainly you when we were first married.
Oh yeah, learn more, know more, do more.
Yeah.
Yeah, without a doubt. Well, it sort of reminds me when we talk about unbridled expression. I worked with a guy. He used to always have this saying, and I thought it was weird. He was younger than me, so maybe it was his generation. He's like, "Hey, I'm just keeping it real," and his version of keeping it real was very critical, usually to staff and
Mm.
to other people. Every time this individual would say, like, "Oh, hey, I'm just keeping it real," I'd be like, "No, you're being a dick.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not keeping it real. There's ways to say things that are kind, and you're not doing it."
Yeah.
And it's time.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time to grow up a little bit.
Well, how did that help his relationships with people?
It didn't. A lot of people didn't want to be around him. The staff didn't like him, and so you can just sort of see that as we talked about in the beginning. We all have these people in our lives.
And you don't want to be around them.
Yeah, I feel bad for them, honestly.
Yeah. So who was that for you? So as you think back in your early life or even in your life now, who is that you've experienced in your life? So just think for a moment about your experience with it and how being around someone like that caused you to feel and how it caused you to respond.
Unbridled expression may not seem like it at first, but it becomes a form of control and manipulation. Whenever our behavior pressures other people to capitulate, to accommodate, especially to the worst parts of us, it's a form of control. And when we are unrestrained and uncontained, it's a sign that our own boundaries are weak, making us psychologically intrusive to other people.
So let's quickly talk about what this looks like in our day-to-day
Yeah.
interactions. So how can we spot unbridled expression? So first, I think is obvious criticisms. You just mentioned
Yep.
criticisms. So criticisms, insults, ad hominem attacks, character attacks, name calling, put downs. These are pretty obvious, I think. So anytime we use this in our communication, we are speaking in such a way that we are really cutting ourselves off from love and from connection and from having goodwill with another person. Like Robert said, you don't want to be around someone who is like that.
Yeah. I mean, you think about that. You're cutting yourself off from the goodwill,
Yeah.
which basically means people aren't going to be kind in return.
No.
Unbridled expression also shows up as one of our favorite terms, contempt.
Mm.
Contempt is looking down on the other person, treating it as if they're inferior or less than, or you're better than them. Contempt is actually one of the most destructive behaviors, negative behaviors in any relationship. Dr. John Gottman's 4 decades of research have identified contempt as the number one predictor of divorce. When in his research, he observed one or both partners displaying contempt, he sees it as the clearest sign that that marriage relationship is in serious trouble.
Yeah.
Contempt can manifest as disrespect, hostile humor, hostile sarcasm, condescension, and it can also include name calling, mimicking, eye rolling, sneering, jeering, any of those things. John Gottman calls contempt sulfuric acid for relationships because it is so harmful and corrosive.
So essentially, contempt is that signal that is conveying in any of those ways. I'm kind of thinking I'm better than you. And you're kind of like a slob. You're beneath me. So an example of that might be saying something like, I learned to do the dishes when I was 5. Are you ever going to figure it out? Are you such a child that you need me to do this for you, honey? Right? It's like that condescension of being better than, being superior to the other person and talking down to them. And to be honest, as I mentioned already, unbridled expression was something I used to do to Robert early on in our marriage, and contempt was the best way I could do it. Anytime I would feel stressed or I would feel frustrated or flooded, if I didn't feel like he would hear me or take my perceptions into advisement, or if I felt like he wasn't accepting my influence, my regressive brain would just take over. And this would be my go-to strategy, this talking down to, this condescension. And it was a way when I was reactive, usually didn't come out when I was in my wise mind, but it came out as a way to control or to overpower Robert. And it took me years to learn to control that impulse. And I would say even to this day, that impulse isn't totally gone. I still will have these occasional thoughts, these nasty little things that will come to my mind if I start to get flooded, which is why it's so important when I do relationship work with couples. I always tell people it's not really learning to communicate, it's learning to understand your nervous system and where you are at when you communicate that matters most. And so even to this day, if I'm starting to feel flooded, those little nasty thoughts might come back to me. Sometimes I think they're not even my thoughts. Sometimes I think they're just memories from things I heard growing up that my mom probably said. But what I've learned is that just because I think it doesn't mean I have to say it. I can question those thoughts. I can challenge those thoughts. I don't need to spill everything out of my mouth that enters my brain just because I am feeling overwhelmed in the moment.
I think we've landed on the title for today's podcast.
What is the title?
Just because you think it doesn't mean you get to say it.
I think that's a good one.
Yeah.
I think we're going to go with that.
Yeah, that might work. Now, here's an interesting fact about contempt since you opened the door on contempt. Yeah. Research has shown that couples who frequently express contempt, couples themselves, are more likely to suffer from infectious illnesses like colds and the flu. So not only does contempt predict the future health of their relationship, i.e., how happy you are together, it also impacts the physical health and, as we've learned in newer research, the longevity of the people involved in that relationship. Contempt is the most damaging of all forms of unbridled expression.
Yeah. It predicts your lifespan.
It's,
and your health.
Chopping years off your life.
And the other thing about unbridled expression is that it really is a disregard for the feelings and the perspectives of the other person, because unbridled expression, its goal at its root is to actually overpower someone else so that we can get them to yield to us, to yield to our opinions or our emotions or our ideas so that we can dominate. And so if you think about that, it's a tactic that's obviously doomed to fail. You're never going to get someone to meet your needs willingly if you're treating them this way, if they're acting and they're only responding to you out of fear. You might temporarily get them to capitulate, but it's never going to be out of love. It's never going to be out of compassion or goodwill, which means it's going to come at a very high cost.
Yeah. And one of the things you'll also see with unbridled expression is the absence of empathy. Typically, when we're doing unbridled expression, we are so consumed by what we want that we can't comprehend how the other person feels or even see the needs that they may have in the moment. That is part of this regressive brain survival mechanism. It cannot be relational. It is 100% focused on self-preservation or meeting self-needs.
Yeah, it's all about me instead of we, because when you're in that regressive brain, the me takes over and the we part, anything that would be relational sort of disappears. So what do we need to do to overcome unbridled expression? Well, first and foremost, the biggest thing, like Robert said at the very beginning, when you know better, you do better. And so the first step is always self-awareness. Most people are doing it and don't even realize that they're doing it, or they're just doing behaviors that were modeled for them growing up and they really don't know there's a better way. So, like we said earlier, it's much easier to listen to this episode and point the finger at your partner and list all the ways in which your partner is failing. But that's not going to work. And thinking that you have any control over another person is just a fantasy. We can only change ourselves. We cannot change what we cannot see. And so we have to start to look within. We have to stop blaming someone else for how we're feeling and how we are behaving. And we have to start to heal ourselves. But to do that, we have to be honest and we have to be willing to self confront. And we have to look at our own reactivity and look at the ways that we're reactive, the strategies that we're using when we're not getting our way, and start to shift those patterns.
Okay, if you've been listening to the show for a while, you know that we like to give homework.
Yes, we do.
So here's some journaling questions that you can ponder this week on the topic of unbridled expression. Ready?
I'm
Get
ready.
your pen out or your notes app. And if you're driving, just pause and pick this up when you're in a safe place. Number one, list the times when you were frustrated in your relationship and not getting what you want. Okay. Number two, what strategies do you use? Have or when have you used unbridled expression?
Okay.
Number three, how is it hurting your spouse or your partner?
It hurts.
Number four, where did you learn these strategies? Was there someone in your life that used these strategies when you were growing up?
Yeah.
And how did that impact you?
I
Maybe
didn't like
learning at the feet of the master.
Yeah. So next, after you go through these questions, I want you to analyze and think, okay, what would I do instead? What might my best self be doing in these situations where I, in the past, would have used unbridled expression? Okay. So for me personally, I'll say that when I start to feel those thoughts come up, those kind of mean thoughts, first I'll have to challenge those thoughts. For me, the empathy piece helps me to get more grounded and more centered back into myself. So I try to think about like, why would a reasonable, rational person, i.e. this person I love, think this way, feel this way, and let that challenge me a little bit. Maybe I ask a question like, okay, Sharla, what would it really be like to be married to me right now? So self-confronting helps me. And another thing is, breathing, remember to breathe, take some breaths, don't talk when you're feeling flooded. And if none of those things are working, I might need to take a break. I might need to say, hey, babe, I need a minute to go get wise. I need you to give me a break. And then I need to go in the other room.
I think that's the greatest way to take the leaving part, especially when we talk about these strategies. It's like, I need to go take a minute to go grow up. And I found that especially when we do it, it's a little bit of, it's a pattern interrupt, and it's certainly timely if I say that, but it's also injecting a little humor where, I'm admitting a weakness. Like, look, I'm about to spin out and be an absolute jerk. So, just give me a little grace. And those are, those are really good strategies.
Yes. So think about, again, analyze, what do you want to do instead? What might the best version of you be doing in these situations where in the past you would have used unbridled expression? And then lastly, start to think about how you're going to interrupt. Robert talks about pattern interrupts. How are you going to interrupt your old behavior next time? So what are some upcoming opportunities you have to practice?
Are the in-laws coming over?
Are you going on a road trip?
Yeah, it could be it.
What are some things you have coming up? And what wisdom do you want to remember? Maybe something we shared on the podcast today. What wisdom do you want to remember the next time you feel yourself right there at that edge of maybe losing control?
Well, that's a wrap for this episode. Make sure to subscribe to the show if you haven't yet, because next week we're sharing the next losing strategy and you don't want to miss it. Thanks so much for being here with us today. We're grateful for all of you, and we'd kindly ask that if you haven't yet, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. It really helps us make a greater impact and help more couples. And if you know anyone who this episode might help, please consider sharing it.
Be kind to each other this week. Take care of each other. Remember, it's the small things done often that make the biggest impact.
Until next time.